And there's that weird delay. So we are live, YouTube live. I got to figure out the dates and everything here, everybody. I guess this is April the 27th. Yes, 2023. I got it. Just being silly. So this is the April review live show. So if you're catching us for the first time on YouTube Live, this is where we go live before we cut on the hot mics for the show that you'll find on YouTube and Apple iTunes and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be reviewing the shows that we did in April. So they were, so you know, Addiction, Recovery, Estrangements, and Family Dynamics. And we got, that'll be a fun one. Well, little thing is we're going to be missing Adam today, but what is Womanizing? I would have loved to have talked to Adam and see what he thought about the show there. And then Conflict makes for a great story, but a lousy life. Those are the shows that we did in April that we're going to kind of review and whatnot. But this is a great way to kind of connect with us as we record usually on Thursdays at about, I don't know, 6:15. I think we're hopefully early today. We're late. How did we get late? That doesn't make any sense. But we do not have Adam usually is hanging out with us at the end of the month. He had an emergent situation that he had to tend to. We're with you in spirit, my friend. Drive safely. He's going to go out of town and tend to that. So we found that out just a couple hours ago. So it's just the end of the month, April in review with me and Neil. So getting ready to go to the hot mics in a moment. So you could respond back and forth to us. YouTube Live is now known to our folks. You know, we catch, I don't know if I get it on my phone here. We catch your live comments and all, so that's been fun to see. You said I have an app, didn't I? YouTube app, there it is. So hopefully I'll pull this up and we'll get it. But it's been a fun month, guys. I mean, I tell you what, here in North Carolina, we've had great weather. It's just like, this is the zone, man. This is the little itty bitty time that we get real spring. So they can kind of see you on the camera, maybe? Not yet. He's far away. There he is.
Now I'm on the camera. Yeah, once we
The app note. Oh, I saw all these lovely things that you typed in the... I'm catching up just now to the delay that you're mentioning with where you just sat down. So
Yep.
That's funny. There is a strange delay. So, yeah, I think we're ready to roll kind of whenever.
Yep. We'll start recording here in a second. So I got to go.
You got to scoot out,
Yep.
scoot back in.
And just so you know, if you catch these, Adam did relay the two words.
Oh, yes.
So we'll talk about that in the
He
show.
still did his part with the,
yep.
what did we call it? I forget.
We
need a cool freaking name, dude. Like,
all right, so
current
viewers,
events.
Viewers, if you have it, what should we call Adam's segment where he gives us two words, like two words in a choice or something weird like that? I don't know. Come up with something. Let us know in the comments here or any of the other social media platforms. Let us know what you think Adam's segment could be called.
I like that, right? And so it's two words that he gives us, and we have to play a game to figure out which one we're going to cover. And it's a current event that has something to do with mental health in this last month, right? So,
and he likes to keep it interesting. This is like a challenge for him. This has become a challenge. So
it's so fun.
Right.
It is fun. You know, I just realized this whole show, like, because we're only like two people now today. Am I supposed to look and talk to you? Like, that's what I'm going to want to do. But the camera's way over there.
You can go either direction. I'll probably be looking at you because, you know, you do. It's good to look at me during the conversation, but when you make those poignant points, you stare at the camera and it makes it really in depth. Yes. So, all right. So I'm going to start the recording here in a second.
Yeah, man. Hit it. I told him that he should be able to use the mic or the mouse so that he doesn't have to get all up and out. He's like, I have no more ports. We need more ports.
Ready?
Yes, sir. Hello, this is Through a Therapist's Eyes on April the 27th, 2023. We are doing the April month in review. So typically we have Mr. Adam Cloninger hanging out with us, and unfortunately he has an emergent situation that he needed to bump on the road to. So, Adam, we're with you in heart and spirit, and we're hoping things are going well. Speed to you, drive carefully. I told him that live. So we just found that out a couple hours ago. So we only have Mr. Neil Robinson hanging out.
Only.
Only.
Wow, that's kind of like rough. I mean, I'm the second fiddle. I know Adam's more exciting, but
That came out wrong. That came out so wrong.
Only Mr. Neil.
Can we delete this and do an editing?
This is going to be in posterity's sake.
Can we do an edit?
So I can prove what you really think about me.
You really want to edit this thing out, and you're the editor. You could do that. That came out so wrong. And we're so highly privileged to have Mr. Neil Robinson with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Glad to be here.
This is the month in review we're going to be doing for the shows that we did in April. Off the cuff, we did Addiction, Recovery, Estrangements, and Family Dynamics. I was really hoping that we would have Adam. Like, I really wanted to talk to him about the show that we did on Womanizing. So, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But and then lastly, Conflict Makes for a Great Story but a Lousy Life that we just recorded last week. So this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, where you get personal insights directly from usually a panel of therapists in your own home or personal time in your car, but it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way. We have the book Being Created. That's the way I'm going to say that now, I think. It's in tow. It's coming along. The next one's on marriage.
Nice.
Yeah. Through a Therapist's Eyes. I'm curious how they'll name it. Rediscovering your marriage and becoming your best selves or something like that.
Re-understanding your marriage and trying to figure them out.
Yeah, right. Holy cow. Subscribe by clicking the bell for the notification on YouTube. Join our channels. We're really trying to pump that up this year. We've got switched over to YouTube instead of the Facebook Lives, and we would love to get up to 1,000 members. And we should do a drive or a push for that. Listen, it makes a big deal difference when you subscribe to the show, tell your friends, speak out. We really need your help. You make this go. We don't. You do. So 5 stars on Apple iTunes, leaving a review on Apple iTunes. It really makes a difference. Please help us. Also, we've got Buy Me a Cup of Coffee we're going to start talking about. We're going to have memberships for the show. And, guys, we really need that. These microphones are getting old. These creaky stands you can see on YouTube. I'm shaking it back and forth. Like, we need some clippers.
Yes, we need some lapel
clippers,
mics. That'll be really nice.
What are they called?
Lapel mics.
Lapel. I call them clippers.
Yeah, I know you do.
Contact at throughatherapist'seyes.com is where you can email us and stuff. This is the human emotional experience which we endeavor to figure out together. So on the YouTube Live, I don't think we had it on the show, but we need a cool name. So I have another ask for you. I've got all these asks today. I feel like pushy with things today. What am I doing?
It's called audience involvement. So
yes.
I wouldn't be pushy about it. We're trying to do what you guys want. So
yes.
Yeah, this is a cool ask.
Right? So we, as you know, we start the month in review off with kind of Adam's game. It's cool. He gives us 2 words, and he has 2 current event articles that have been in the news or in the world, really. I don't know if it's just the news, that affect mental health. And then we kind of kick that off and talk about that with what he has seen. So the ask is, we need a cool name for it. Like, what is this? Adam's cool events or Adam's current events or I don't know. Something would be a good name. So we need you creative people out there to help us name the game. What is the game? Let's start there because I think that he gave you the 2 words.
He did.
And the news articles, do you know them? Or
he gave me like a rough overview what they're about.
Yeah.
Now, one, he didn't really give an article, but honestly, both things I understand enough that when we talk about it, I think we have enough conversation.
You'll be at depth.
I think we'll be fine to go over it when you get the actual information.
Interesting. So I don't get to debate with you though. What ones we
this is
we
all
can
on
talk.
you.
This
is
I have
all
to
your
respond.
Choice.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's shoot, man. What do we got?
All right. The 2 words are guillotine and TikTok.
Guillotine
And TikTok. Those are your 2 words.
The news items are guillotine. How can guillotine be a? See, you know what I thought was going to start happening is Adam's going to start getting like, he already messes with us a little bit, you know. Like he gives these weird, obscure. Like last week, he gave these obscure words. I don't like that. That needs to have some sense to it.
No, I think it's fun. I think it
The weird
definitely because I feel like if he goes too obvious with it, then it makes our choice. So the fact that he's come
Yeah.
with obscure things that are kind of like wordplay. One, I love wordplay.
Yes.
But I think that's great. But then two, it keeps it more interesting, keeps it more honest. Like which one do we really want? So I like the fact that we don't really know.
Because how am I supposed to pick TikTok when I've got guillotine? We got to go guillotine.
I mean, you sure? You seem like you're a TikToker.
I am not.
Probably the fact that I called you a TikToker probably means that I'm not a TikToker. So
My head is being slammed on the mics. I am not a TikToker. Although that might be a good platform to get on there.
no,
Behind the curtain guy.
No, we'll stick with YouTube.
All right. Well, so YouTube,
YouTube
or,
and
I mean,
Instagram.
guillotine. What the heck could guillotine be in mental health? We're talking about the thing that cuts people's heads off, right?
Well, I mean that solves your mental health problems.
Right.
But no, okay.
We're
So
far from a lobotomy, Adam. Dude, this is interesting.
so that you're picking guillotine is what you're picking. Okay. So guillotine, I guess, and I didn't know this, but I guess there's riots in France. So France guillotine, they were like one of the last countries to still use the guillotine.
Oh.
But there are riots in France regarding changing the minimum retirement age from 64 or 62 to 64. So they're now increasing the minimum retirement age.
Oh.
So that's not what you thought, right?
No. No.
And I didn't know this, so I haven't been paying
French
attention.
cheese.
So,
I have not noticed that either, that story.
but I could see, like, if we put that here, think about now, what is it here? 62 and a half is like the minimum, or is it 60 here?
I thought it was 63, to be honest with you.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So imagine
Yeah.
going from like 63 to 65. Like
Right.
what that would do for the psyche for those people that are close to retirement. Like I could just only imagine here in the States what that means. So like in France, it's the exact same thing.
Well, okay, so this isn't about the issue, but I am reminded of a conversation we were having in panel not too long ago that I kind of made the point, and this sort of demonstrates a little bit some meat behind my point. What were we talking about? I forget the topic, but I was maintaining that these issues kind of are around the world.
Mhm.
Like we in the States get, I think, kind of a bad rap because, our political system is so skewed and everyone's in their own silos and it's left against right and that type of thing. But, I have a sense that, like, I don't know the story, but the Italians are fighting over tomatoes or something is what I heard. We've got the massive issues in Israel with Netanyahu. You've got not too long ago Brexit and the incredible challenges that are in Great Britain, and of course the Ukraine stuff and the mis and disinformation that's out there with that. I mean, this stuff is like everywhere so far as people's experience in social media. So this is kind of another example of that. They're rioting.
I guess I will have to look that one up and get more details. But yeah, according to him, they're rioting in France. I mean, even
Yeah.
Canada had the issue with Trudeau and the whole trucker convoy.
Well,
like
yes.
there is really a lot of stuff. And my question is, with social media and the news being 24/7, are we just being more aware of what's going on around the world, where a lot of these things are, before it would be considered local versus international kind of news, which is an interesting
I think it
topic,
has
too.
a lot to do with 9/11. I've said this before on the show. 9/11 was the first sort of major event that we can watch around the world, and you throw in the development over the next several years of an instant ability to get the news
Yes.
and an instant ability to respond to the news and a viral explosion of whatever is hot in the moment, and you've got a recipe for human, oh God, just like horrible human impulsiveness.
Yes, technology is an amazing thing, but it takes a little bit for humans to catch up.
We are way behind
Yep.
knowing how to cope with this. So when something doesn't go the right way and you get, a policy that changes in France and people are violent about it. I mean, I hope they're not using guillotines, but yeah, to answer your question, this is a major mental health reality because of the macro level issue that we feel so strong about a particular issue. And you're going right up to the bar, and now you're going to, Lucy, pull the football right out from under me, and now I got to work 2 more years? 2 more years?
Mhm. Yeah, that's crazy. That's like imagine
That's
imagine
tough.
imagine talking to an 18-year-old, be like, "Hey, you got 2 more years of high school."
Oh,
Oh, just think about the riots that would happen at that point.
that hits hard because I got Adam first congratulatory if he graduates on time. It's still an if because it hasn't happened yet. I got a high school graduate this year, so he just hit me.
Fantastic.
That
You're
would be
finishing your high
horrible.
schoolers, and my oldest
Yes.
will be a senior next year. So
Yes.
we're starting that whole process of like my wife is slowly starting to get that realization.
It's real. It's real. It's real. So, yeah, I hate to hear that, guys around the world and in France. I mean, it sounds like it's a very tough time. It's a scary time, not knowing how this is going to come out, how this is going to, work itself out. I can tell you that from a mental health perspective, when change is happening, we get afraid of that change. But sometimes change is really necessary, and we need to work through the way that we feel with just the idea of change and then evaluate kind of what's happening. It's funny about the retirement age, too, I'll add. Craig on the show long ago pointed out that retirement is actually a new concept. Okay. The retirement age was sort of arbitrarily set, at least in the States, and I suspect followed around the world at the age that it is now, 62, during the New Deal. Do you remember Craig talking about this?
No, I think that was before I hopped on. So.
Okay, yeah. And so during the New Deal was Franklin or Teddy Roosevelt?
Wouldn't be Ted. Well, Teddy was a long time ago. I think it would probably be Franklin.
Franklin, yeah, I think that's right.
Because more likely was that kind of tied also to social security
All of it.
being
Yeah, the New Deal involved a lot of things, and part of it was Social Security. And the retirement age was set arbitrarily, like 62, 63, wherever it is, and I think it's stayed the same since.
Probably.
Well, do you know the expected life expectancy at the time?
Like 65 probably or 70. Like it was relatively. You
50s.
wouldn't. You
50s.
would. Wow. I guess back then, whenever that makes sense.
In the 30s or so, in the 20s or 30s, whenever that was all out, it was low. So your life expectancy was like before the age of retirement. And so it just grew into like this thing that now, as our life expectancies have grown and grown and grown, that age hasn't changed. And so if you look at the history of how that was developed and how that is, systems need to kind of change with life expectancy. And dare I make a stand or say that it's reasonable to consider raising the retirement age? Craig's notion of retirement is such that why would you retire? Not, I shouldn't say that. Craig found information where somebody was talking about the notion. Why would you retire when you have so much productivity left in your body, in your mind? If you have something to offer, why would you retire?
Yeah. So looking at it, just so you know, it was around 1939-ish when it happened, and the expectancy in the 30s was basically 58 for men and 62 for women.
Yeah.
So it goes back to your statement. Well, retirement age is 65. How many people were really around? And also the idea that Social Security was a supplement. It wasn't something that a lot of people weren't supposed to rely on. And so now with, like you said, life expectancy changing, this has been around for a while, so now people start expecting it. The whole idea needs to be shifted. And like you said, it's some arbitrary number that was created a long time ago by the government that technically, looking at the numbers, they really weren't going to have to give out a lot of Social Security.
Not at all.
So yeah, it sounds like a great idea.
Now it's a free-for-all.
Exactly. So, but yeah, that's it. That's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing about technology that I thought was interesting, not only do you get news faster, but think about the organizers, the protests. You think about what it used to be like to protest. You had to hand out the flyers. You had to try to call people. Now it's like something happens and you got that. And the thing is with people's herd mentalities and that kind of stuff, like as soon as it happens, the emotions kick in. Everyone wants to act now. And so now you have these protests faster. And there's a lot more, I think, aggression to it because there's more raw feelings.
Absolutely.
And so these protests are now even more.
You haven't even had a day or two to process what's happened, to contain what it is that you're feeling, to become more objective about the issue. Yep. It's just now.
Right, which goes back to the issue of news and impulse and now how you
human impulsive behavior.
Exactly. Huge mental health issue.
Yes. Good one, Adam. Let's see. Let's get into our reviews. So, show number 1 was episode 224, which was on the heel of 223, where we just got completely inundated with thoughts about what is addiction. So, this was the actual show that we intended to do in the first place, right? And this is cool, the month in reviews, too, because Neil gets to come out onto the mics behind the curtain in front and speak your mind as you were listening to the show and hearing all these things. And I know this particular issue, when we recorded last month's review with addiction, was quite interesting to you. So I'm curious, you had a lot of thoughts about it, just what your thoughts were or are about the estrangements in relationships that when an addicted individual gets into recovery has to go back and kind of reestablish or work through into a reconnection with these relationships that are lost.
Yeah, it was actually a very interesting topic because
the 3 questions too, by the way, real
Yes.
quick. Do you have a clear understanding what addiction is, and what does recovery mean to you, and what do we mean by addiction being a family disease? So we'll kick through that.
well, one, I hope that we have a clear understanding after spending a whole episode, and I think we
I
probably
don't think we do.
yeah. I was confused after that one, still trying to
Yeah.
figure that out, the difference between the addiction
lot of
versus
people
the
are.
abuse. Yeah, I was even talking to my wife about it too, and she's like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And then I started explaining like the things you talked about. I'm like, she's like, "Oh, that makes more sense." She had an uncle who would always have a couple beers every night with his cup of milk, and that doesn't make him an alcoholic.
With this cup of milk?
He would have milk too. It was weird. He would have 2 beers and then like
2 beers and then a milk.
her aunt would bring him his stuff when he got home from work, and it was like a couple beers and a cup of milk and his dinner.
Like
it was,
milk and Kahlua?
no,
milk and
like
rum?
it would just be
Like-
like you would have a cup of milk and then you'd have a couple beers, and that was just what he would use. Like I don't know the whole, but it goes back to the idea of what is addiction and what that changes and what that really means, the extent of it. So that
Right.
that was an interesting conversation that I had with my wife,
Nice.
because I'm like, just because he had this every night doesn't mean he was an addict, because there's more to it, and we explained the difference. And I was like, oh, it's that control, that loss of control. There were so many things. My eyes open when we talked about it, but I think a couple of things that stood out from the show is, one, the idea of when you look at actual addiction, the idea of always being in a consistent state of recovery versus recovered is
Recovering or recovered.
right. I think that was a huge thing, because when we talk about addiction and the fact that it's that loss of control, you have to resort yourself to knowing that I can't do this if I want to go with that controlled route. If I want to do you talked about people who control drinking if they're actually a recovering alcoholic, because there's something genetically that's putting you at a disadvantage to being able to control it. And so I think that's a very important thing when you actually have an addictive personality, you actually have that. I think that's a good indicator to understand, which leads to your family, because having them understand that.
Well, before we go to family, did we talk about severity levels with addiction actually? I don't think we did.
Elaborate. What do you mean?
Because this goes with the idea of recovered and recovering and what is addiction. And somebody recently said something that got my brain, which has happened throughout my career. You hear different things and you think and see these things differently, and it sort of moves around until we get science that kind of really nails things down a little bit more for us. So this is cool, and this is new in my thinking. So follow me for a second before we go to the family thoughts that you had. So if we have genetic predispositions that set us up for the susceptibility of not having control over our relationship with alcohol or said drug, as defined by, best way I've come up with, is predictability, control and predictability. High predictability, you have control. Low predictability, what happens when you use not as control. So if we have that biological reality, as with a lot of other realities with cardiac genetic dispositions, or colon troubles, or any of the number of issues we have biologically, diabetes, it sets up a severity level too. Like people that have a genetic susceptibility with addiction also might be sort of geared biologically to have a really strong one, which is quick progression and really significantly harder addiction issues than more on the mild side. So is it so that the severity levels or how things progress is different and guided in some way biologically? And I would think, yeah.
I would think so too, because it just goes back to, you talked about it before, with someone who drinks, they have a build up a tolerance, and they might slowly after a couple weeks they might add another beer at night, or they might, but it's a slow progression, where an alcoholic would
is.
basically be like 1, 2, 3, 4, like you extend a lot faster. That severity, once you trigger that, whatever that is that makes you feel good, once you take that first hit, or you take that first have that first drink, or you have that first whatever, that's where you have that severity of,
Begins to grab you.
it goes from 0 to 60 a lot faster. You're a sports car as opposed to a VW.
And we see that, man. I mean, there's some people, their drinking careers, I mean, they've been drinking for 15, 20, 30 years before they end up getting to some of the significant signs and symptoms that have been there all along, but it's screamingly loud at that point in their life. Like, not many people would deny they have a drinking problem at that point, but they've been doing that for that long. But some people are hitting that when their drinking career is only 5 years long or 3 or less.
Right.
And that's crazy.
Well, here, do you think part of that is not genetics, but also maybe their life, where basically
There's always
there's certain issues where, like,
combo.
as things happen, they have the availability to dive into it faster, more, versus having a busier life, and they don't. It's harder to dive into it because they have a significant other that watches them. They have a busier life. They have, like, there's certain things on the outside that maybe is keeping them from it, and you don't realize it till they quit their job, they change their job, their spouse, like, there's these things that kind of
There is, but
allows
there
them.
isn't. There's social and emotional realities that are a part of the mix. That's why this stuff is, pretty complex.
Yeah.
But when we're really just narrowing it down to the biological part, that stuff doesn't matter as much. No, it really doesn't.
If it's that bad, no matter what the scenario is, they'll
doesn't
go
matter.
for it no matter what.
Because there are completely balanced people or family systems that have a raging alcoholic or drug addict that's in the midst. Their social and emotional life has been support and encouragement. We don't have any trauma. There's not domestic violence. There's not really much going on. But yet, your relationship with weed just took off.
Yeah.
Or pills took off.
Right.
And
because you finally got that first whatever.
Your brain's euphoric system
kicks in, and you felt good, and you just go from there. Yep.
Hell of a ride. So to go back to the family thing, I kind of cut you off a little bit there. You remember where you were?
So the thought process on the recovered versus recovery is the idea that when you're dealing with family and friends, they also have to understand that this isn't something that you finish and you move on. That it is a continual process that they have to be aware of. So just, part of that is that added strain, or that added thing overhanging them if they don't take care of it. Like, this is a continual process. This isn't a he's fixed or she's fixed and you move on. It's the reality that there's a continual risk of diving back into it. There's the continual risk of getting hooked back into it. And I could see that causing a strain in unless you have clear expectations or clear, this is what it means going forward. Because there is the constant, like, I can't do the normal things because I know I now have these limitations. So I can see that as a kind of an odd strain too on the family, because you kind of have that kind of hanging over your head until you kind of go to your next step of get the non-addicts getting their treatment and learning how to recover themselves with dealing with the past situations.
Getting the non-addicts their treatment as well. Yeah. Before we go there, I wanted to kind of do part of what's cool on these review shows is I get to cover a little more content that we didn't get to or wasn't able to do. And with this issue, John, if you remember, he wants to go back and deal with the family dynamics again because we didn't get to talk at all about the traditional substance abuse family characters that play out. And I was cool because John and I come from a similar background in that information being steeped into us. It's not thought a lot about nowadays much, honestly, at all. But I wanted to take this opportunity to do this. So follow me, Neil. It's crazy, right? When you have an alcoholic dysfunctional family system, it operates in much of the same ways from family unit to family unit to family unit. It's almost scary and creepy. Sort of like when I describe abandonment and engulfment in marriage cycles. People feel like, oh my God, are you in my house? Like, how do you know this? And I'm like, no, I'm really not. We just know the patterns that get created with human behavior. Well, among much of anything really else that I've come across in, you know, our field of mental health and substance abuse, until EFT, the abandonment marriage cycles, I haven't really found things that are this clear and this precise as these characters that play out in substance abuse families. Sound interesting?
Very much.
This
so.
is when Adam would like crack some sort of joke or something, wouldn't he?
Maybe.
It'd be like family dynamics. Well, that reminds me of when we had a dynamo out there. And sorry, that was a very poor attempt at Adam, wasn't it?
That was. That's okay.
That was pathetically shameful. It's all right.
It's okay.
So you have the addict, right? And we've talked about codependence on the show before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the addict and the codependent person link up like just beautifully. It fits like a glove. A codependent person who's looking for someone to take care of to make themselves better. Remember, I am what the other person is. The other person is well. I am well. The other person is not well. Then I am not well. So I'm trying to make you well so that ultimately I'll be well. That's the line of sort of emotional experience a codependent person goes through. Well, an addict is going to eat that up.
Right, because the addict's going to be taken care of by the codependent.
It
They're going to be able to
fits.
do their addiction. They're going to do what they want to, and the codependent person is going to be picking up the slack, trying to make them feel better.
Right.
And yeah.
Now you've got the firstborn child. The firstborn child is actually referred to as a family hero, and it literally kind of goes in this order. Nothing's ever this black and white, but a family hero has all kinds of emotional stuff they're observing internally, going through and seeing their family operate the way they do dysfunctionally and whatnot. And they go out and they become wildly successful. They're the valedictorian, they're the all-star sports
The
kid.
overachiever.
They are the overachiever. And I can say this publicly because I know that he shared and he wouldn't care. Do you remember our buddy Tom Dutta?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
He is the CEO, amazing man in Canada. If you hear this, Tom, I love you, buddy. We miss you. I need to give you a call. We need to chat just to catch up. But he shared that about him. He was a CEO at like I'm making it up, but it was like 28 or something. Do you
He was
remember?
very young, yeah. I don't remember how old he was.
Stupid young.
Yeah.
High achiever, the family hero. The next is the family scapegoat, the second born child. And that's because they have their own internal feelings and whatnot, and they see the dysfunctional stuff that's going on, and they're pissed off. And they draw attention away from the addicted individual and loudly become the focus of all the problems. I am the scapegoat. I am the loud. I'm always in trouble, blah, blah, blah. The hero, by the way, takes the attention from the addiction issues away and puts it onto the lofty goals and high achieving. Third comes the, oh, yeah, of course. I had to think there for a second. Third born child tends to become into the mascot. That's what they're called. They see the family hero, they see the scapegoat, they see the emotional dynamics of what's going on. They have all sorts of feelings about this internally, and they just bring humor. They don't take anything seriously, and they just run with laughing and goofing, and they're the goofy clown kid, right? And then the last one actually is called the lost child, because the youngest tends to just get lost in their own little world, their own little space. They just shut down, withdraw, and they have their own little corner. So I just wanted to lay those out there as a cool piece that we didn't get to talk about with family dynamics. And I'm sure we'll do a full show on that stuff. We actually have in our annals of episodes.
So if there's only one or two kids, does the mascot and the lost child become like merged in with the other two, or is it just one of those things where you just have overachiever, underachiever, and that's it?
Yeah, kind of that's it. And it also moves around a little bit, I think, in these roles. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be that right birth order. But you'll find, for instance, in family dynamics, there really generally is, for sure, somewhere, usually, a high achiever. It's the person that just, they go.
Do you think personality dictates the role they play?
Probably.
In some, like I know you have the
Probably.
birth order, but I can definitely see where sometimes it's a personality thing. You know,
Yeah.
if the first personality has a kind of a laid back kind of joking personality or an abandonment, they might be more might be more wanting to make jokes as opposed to being an overachiever.
I'm just making a joke, kind of, but not really. In our dysfunctional family as a child, I was actually the family hero. And my brother, the older one, turned into like the mascot / scapegoat.
Right, and so that goes back to personality. There's
Yeah.
a role that has to be played to kind of that the children are trying to fulfill in this dysfunctional alcoholic environment, and based on the personality, you're going to fall into one of these four categories
Oh, yeah.
depending how your nature is, and then the role you need to fit based
I
on
think
your
so.
personality.
Now you're on to it, and by the way, I mean it's really maladaptive in a lot of ways. I mean, with the struggles and challenges that I had growing up, being the high achiever. I mean, it sucks. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of disappointing people and get the heavy people pleasing thing come on. I mean, I had to unwind a lot of that stuff as I matured and grew, and hopefully I did a little bit of a job.
I can see that in your personality.
Oh yeah.
You're very aware of situations, and I can see you being an overachiever,
Oh yeah.
like wanting to please a lot of people.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's just a difference in how you are. So
Uh-huh. It's had some good results.
it has. It's
Done
just,
some
but
cool
it
things.
makes sense. I could see how your personality left you as the overachiever.
Yeah.
I can easily see that.
Yeah. So let's move a little bit to, boy, we've covered this a long time, haven't we? Addiction is such an interesting issue, though, because so many people talk about it and don't, I think, miss it nowadays in the clinical culture that we have with alcohol use disorder, which is so stupidly named. I will say that. It is so stupidly named.
I feel like there's a lot of things that I feel like the medical field or society is trying to sugarcoat, even though some things shouldn't be sugarcoated. I get my wife and I'm talking about. I don't remember what we're talking about, but they're like, "Why would you call it that? Like, it's not a good thing. Why would you try to make it seem okay, or why would you make it
Water it
less
down,
painful
or-
than it probably is?" And I remember what we're talking about, but I'm not going to say what we talk about. But yeah, it's like, why would you try to make it less than what it is? It's a serious situation. Why would you try to make it like?
Yeah.
Because to me, in my head, I'm like,
Alcoholism is alcoholism.
right. To me, it's like if it's a problem, call it what it is. If a duck's
Addiction
a duck,
is addiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
It's not
so,
a use disorder.
and to me, in my head, like the more harsh it is, hopefully, the more it's going to basically help you realize it and move on. But every personality is different. So,
Indeed.
but seeing the kid, going back to the last question, family disease. Each kid is affected by the disease, and so that's why I can see where the term family disease, because even though one person's an alcoholic, it dictates
Massive
how-
impact.
Yeah, it's huge. So, but yeah, going back to the last thing we talked about is, it is important when you're in a family that's dealing with someone who's an alcoholic, they have to address their own problems. They have to go back to that non-addict needs treatment.
You're segueing for us.
Right, so we can close to the next one. But
Yes.
yeah, I think that's something that maybe people don't really think about. That while
They do
while
not.
the one parent or the one person was the alcoholic, there is ramifications that you have to address it yourself so you can have a productive life going forward. When you meet your significant other, your spouse, you're not having baggage or things that's causing problems. When you go to work, you're not having issues. If you want to actually have a relationship, repair a relationship with the alcoholic parent, you have to repair yourself, because there will be resentment, there will be avoidance, there'll be all sorts of stuff if you don't deal with it, if you want a relationship to basically blossom from that.
I just had a conversation today, and I'm not going to say realizing, because I think they've realized it a while ago, but realizing more and more the depths upon which this person has been ruled by addiction being all around them in their life, from a child to now, in midlife. And the reality of somebody being in rehab, your wife or husband, you really have a challenge, because everyone comes around and they're like, "Oh, how's your spouse? Is your spouse doing okay? Are they recovering? Are they doing good? Are they doing good? How's your spouse? How's your spouse? How's your spouse?" Meanwhile, it's like,
What about me?
like, You do realize I've been living with now realizing an alcoholic for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And the impacts on my life and my emotions and my need for recovery, if they're aware of that. And this person is and has been, but the depths of the need to be aware of your own impact and emotion goes into that. Like since childhood, since before you even got married.
Yep.
You know, and if you don't do that recovery, ma'am, who's married to an alcoholic, or sir, who's married to an alcoholic or drug addict, then you're really missing the boat, because this is equally about your emotional journey than it is the person who goes off into wonderful treatment programs against recovery and treatment, and you're left here like absolutely needing to do your own work.
The bystander has to take care of themselves just as much as the person who's doing it.
It is absolutely something we've figured out now for the last 30, 40 years. Prior, we didn't even realize it ourselves in the field.
I feel like just like those statements, I feel like the focus was always on the person, the alcoholic themselves, not understanding the ramifications of the people around it. So
we're going to move on to the next show to review just because of time. But where did we land is on the ideas of, what do you do to reestablish those relationships? So check out 224, and I think that you'll get, more on that then. But, oh, Adam, where are you to make womanizing jokes? Episode, I don't know if he would make jokes if he would be that brave about womanizing. You think he'd crack jokes or be all silly about womanizing?
I'd make fun of him being the single guy.
Oh. I don't know that we can call him single anymore.
Yeah, I know that now, but it's still one of those things that, he's definitely, closer to that than you and I are.
He is definitely closer to that than you and I are, yeah. But he said on the show he's a taken man. I remember that. I busted him about
I know
that.
he is. Yeah,
that was shocking when he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm taken." I'm like, "Whoa, what did he just say?" All right, anyway, we do digress. Episode 225 was, what is womanizing? With the 3 questions. How do we define this in modern day? Why has the term mansplaining come out so much for us? And is this traumatic experience unidentified? What did you take from the show on womanizing, Neil? How did that ring through in your brain as we went along?
I would think that when you look at the actual term womanizing, I feel like there's certain things that are either, I feel like there's a twist in society where womanizing has become more white. They're using that term more than they should.
Did that come out now? That John was really good about that.
Yeah, and I know Victoria talked about some stuff too that I was kind of like there's this weird dynamic going on in society where like if a guy doesn't commit, he's a womanizer, but yet wait, no, that's not really what, like there's some stuff in the idea of in society what an actual womanizer is when you break it down and you look at the really what it means to be a womanizer, like just like what it really means to be an alcoholic. There's some chronic, there's some stuff going on that's deeper than just some guy who basically just doesn't want to marry his girl.
Right.
There's
commitment
a difference.
phobe or something.
Right. So that was one thing I kind of took away from it, that it's kind of like, okay, well, really, what does it mean? It's like I said, this was an eye opener when you think about what it means. And so there's a deeper meaning to a womanizer. There's more to it than what society thinks it is.
John added a really important piece to it, but first I'm going to go with this is the first time we used Chat GPT definition. Remember how Victoria didn't even know what Chat GPT was?
That was funny, but she's also a therapist, not a technology person. So.
She's a millennial.
Yeah, but
like,
she's not a techie millennial. There's a difference between like someone who just uses Facebook and Instagram and someone who actually really dives into technology. Like there's a difference.
Listen, she got on our networks and made the printer work. I didn't even have to call our tech guy.
Still different. There's a difference in the way that
I'm not letting her go. I'm not letting her go.
Plus, she also has a 1-year-old, and like she has enough
with
stuff
that
to worry
there,
about.
yes. Okay.
Like ChatGPT is so far down on her radar. Like with everything else, she's learning and growing and being a newer therapist.
That I can accept. So. That I can accept. But we used ChatGPT, which if you don't know what it is, it's a new internet thing. I'm not even going into it. We did give a nice description of that, but it's a artificial intelligence. Sort of artificial intelligence tool that takes all of the internet's information and interacts with you directly to ask questions and get into dialogue, and it does a lot of amazing things. It's going to be amazing for the human race, all told, honestly. But this definition came up for what is womanizing. ChatGPT's definition: a behavior that involves a pursuit and objectification of women for the purpose of sexual conquests or gratification, often without regard for their feelings or well-being. It could take many forms, including persistent flirting, casual sex, and engaging in multiple simultaneous romantic relationships. John really added a very important and interesting, well, powerful component that needs to be put into our understanding of womanizing, and that is compulsivity. Right? There's a compulsive side to this. There's a bunch of emotional realities that someone that's caught into womanizing that is not managing really well, and it's spinning off into really inappropriate boundaries and conquests of the prospective partner. And this type of a thing, like Bill Clinton with many sexual affairs allegedly, or so. President Trump with many allegedly per so affairs. One that's in the courts now, like literally today, right? And we talked about John Edwards, these political figures, but there's Epstein and all these different high profile, but day-to-day people as well that are really engaged in a highly compulsive type of behavior with sexuality in women. That compulsivity is a really important piece.
Makes sense. Well, and that's why kind of, to me, that the reality that someone who is a chronic womanizer, to me, is almost on the same level as someone who's an addict, because it's like you said, that compulsivity.
It's a really
that they change their life to find that woman. That's like their addiction, is those relationships, those conquests. Like, that's an interesting term because there's a level of thrill to it.
So remember when we were kicking that around, like, is that still a term? What's the new clinical term? And we were working that out in real time through our experience, particularly John and I think, when the term womanizing was more readily used and whatnot, or came out, we didn't really even know about sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
We really didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
And now we do. And so the compulsive nature of your behavior with womanizing, I suspect, has a very big connection with the compulsive behavior that is sex addiction.
Well, I mean, even think about, okay, so here's something that maybe is a far stretch, but part of the thing we like looking at the behavior of a womanizer, it's also there's the thrill of the hunt. And we talked about online gaming addiction. You talked about the PvP aspect of it, where you're playing against another player and that dopamine hit from you doing that.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of correlates a lot of those behavior addictions you're talking about, those whatever you call
process addictions.
Thank you, process addictions. It's very similar. You have the PvP, like womanizer, trying to find someone, find that woman, get that woman before someone else does. There's that. Plus, PvP. Then you have exactly.
Oh wow.
Then you have the conquest, the actual, actually doing the deed, and then on top of that, it's like once that's done, the throw's over. Well, now you got to find the next one, and then the next one, and then you're just constantly going one after another. Where now you're adding more,
and that's likely sex addiction. Yeah. I mean, you're like describing sexual addiction,
exactly,
which is womanizing. And also I really don't want to lose this highlight. I know I'm aware of the time. We need to move to the next review show, but John and I really connected a lot with the idea that where is the title of, and what did we come up with? Womanizing or manizing?
I think, I don't know.
Mayonnaise?
I don't know if this, but it's
manizing.
It's almost one of those things where I think the term for women, because I was thinking about this a minute ago, I feel like you have a womanizer who's a guy who basically does that, and then I feel like with women, it's almost like, I think the common term I feel like they use is she has daddy issues or something like that. And I don't know, but that's that whole idea that there's that idea of that not having, attachment issues, moving from one guy to the next. Like, and maybe that's not the correct term, but that's the closest thing I could think of. outside of some
and
other
how people talk about it.
right, outside of that, it's like derogatory terms that you use for women who sleep around.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And so it's kind of weird that on a guy's side they have a term for it that makes it kind of interesting, where on women's side it's very derogatory.
It's not. Yeah.
And so it's one of those, it's interesting, but it's the same basic thing. It's the attachment issues,
and
it's compulsivity.
We talked about with high level women nowadays, at least cracking, if not breaking the glass ceiling. There are all sorts of executives that are out there, and this is happening. And I went out on a limb and said, I think we're going to see this a lot more in the decades to come, where men are going to be silent about it, i.e., but it's going to be a major reversal.
I think you're going to have a lot more women who are going to be doing this, and then you're going to have a lot more men talking about them having this done to them. I think there's both sides of it, that the increase of women is going to that's going to happen because, like you said, that glass ceiling is broke. So a lot of these women, they're changing their roles, they're changing the way things are done. They're going to be in those positions to do it, but then guys are going to get to a point like, who am I, chop liver?
Well, let's be clear. When this happens to you, it is not, whether you're a guy or a girl, it is not an okay thing. And if you know of this, we made a big point on the show. Speak up, speak out. Like, people can get trapped in this. Women are really, really stuck and feeling alone. And it's a horrible
There's a lot of guys
reality.
in relationships like this that they get sucked in by that girl, and then they have that quick relationship, that quick fling, and then they move on, or they're enticed to do something they don't want to do, but because of their side of the relationship. And of course, this doesn't go into anything that where you do force. That's a whole nother issue in itself. But the reality is there's the John brought up narcissism and those types of things as well. So I definitely think this is definitely not just one-sided when it comes to womanizing. It's just not men going after women. It's really shifting as well to where there's a lot more women doing the exact same thing the other way around. So
again, I don't think we're going to go into the mansplaining thing, but it came up, and we kind of, I think, did we pretty conclusively agree, Victoria, John, and I, that mansplaining is kind of really different.
It's nothing like it. Mansplaining is just, there's all sorts of stuff with it, but it's nothing like womanizing. There's
different
we talked about
universes.
that. It's a completely different level. It's completely different everything. Like, it's just, but I know that there are some people that see it as the same thing for various reasons. Like, but it's not.
It's not.
It's not the same thing. So
it's very, very definitely a way lower severity scale.
Yeah.
So where do we land? Really, it is to deal with relationship issues in arguably an abusive relationship, how to manage avoiding or healing or recovering from womanizing, respecting boundaries, honesty and transparency, dealing with communication issues, avoiding objectification, meaning you really kind of respect and value the person as the person is. And there's probably a whole lot more about relationship dynamics that we can go into.
I do want to point out Victoria's quote.
Oh.
Well, it was basically,
what was it?
Boundaries without consequences is just a heavy suggestion.
Yes.
I think that's just like raising kids. If you don't have consequences to what you tell them to do, it's just a suggestion and it just doesn't carry the weight. And I thought that was a fantastic quote, that Victoria. I know it wasn't hers. She says she got it from someone else. So once again, audience, if you know who said that quote, let us know so we can credit it
correctly.
I thought that was a great thing.
It really is true.
Because sometimes for some of these guys and women that do this, if you don't have clear boundaries, you just basically get taken advantage of, and you have to learn to cut off if it comes down to it.
It's huge.
And we had that show on boundaries. I don't know what episode it was, but if you have issues with boundaries, check out that episode. Go to our website, throughtherapisteyes.com, and just search for boundaries. You'll find
it'll definitely come up. Yeah, no, I'm glad you did that. That is fantastically well done. So the other episode 226 we did is a great story. Conflict makes for a great story, but a lousy life. And it was a show that I should have done literally like a year and a half or 2 years ago. I intended. I have so many different content pieces, and I found this one sort of roaming around my topics list. It was Mr. How did I do him on the show? Yeah, Mr. Daniel. Appreciate doing therapy with you. It's such an honor and a privilege, and I'm sorry that it took, excuse me, this long to get into this, but we did. Better late than never, because this was his quote. This was his thought, and I thought it was really, really a powerful thought to think about. How do we incorporate this in life? So we talked a lot about conflict, right? Why are we so drawn to watch or root for conflict? I.e., like, why does it make for a good story? And then the second question: what pain is triggered with conflict, making it a lousy life, right? And then we spoke pretty well, I think, about what good can come from conflict. I don't know if we actually. I don't know that we did a whole lot of that, but we probably could have
Yeah,
done more.
we talked about some of the good that comes from it because I think looking at this, and when you look at our natural tendencies as man and stuff like that, conflict is a good thing. I honestly, to me, I think conflict
necessary.
is a great thing.
I think anytime it came up, John and I kind of agreed with each other, and we went on.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, great.
And it was like, yeah, absolutely, right? And then we went on. It was like, so, but here's an interesting question. I wish we would have sat down on for a minute. If we can easily agree that conflict has positive outcomes, for sure, not a lot of conflict there in the discussion, then why do we avoid it so much? Like,
Why do we avoid exercising? It's painful during the moment.
okay, well, damn, Neil, that's right on point.
I mean, how many times growing up, or even now, when you think about growing up, when your parents argued and they had that conflict, how did that make you feel? I mean, it was
terrified,
rough. It was horrible.
Absolutely.
Or when your spouse or a coworker or your kids have those conflicts, like it's rough. It's painful at the time, but what you get out of those, because I know there were times my wife and I, we'd get in arguments and fight, we have our conflicts, but a lot of times that's when we air our laundry, and next now we know the boundaries, now we know what's going on, and now our relationship got stronger because of those conflicts or those types of situations, or conflicts could be other stuff, but that's why we avoid it, because it's painful.
Yeah,
it hurts, just like going to the gym and running on the treadmill. It's painful. It hurts.
I think a lot. You're really on point. I mean, I was all geeked up for a good discussion about like an angle that we missed, but you're I think probably right on point and right on target with, the fact that it is painful and then we avoid it. But it's interesting. I guess if we were to try to get in the weeds a little bit with that, right? Like if we really knew. Okay, I'll go with this a little further. If we really, really understood that you and me being in conflict about some direction we want to take through a therapist's eyes, right? I'm the content creator. Neil's the director of everything else, basically. You do it all. Like, if we're really in conflict about something and we really knew the benefits that could create, or the creative new outcomes that would benefit us, if we really had an idea that when you and me are in conflict over something, this is going to be a great thing, then might we avoid it less? And is that different than exercise? It's painful, yes, but there's people know that exercising helps them. And I think there's much more of a push. Like, have you, here you go, Neil. Have you ever heard of a New Year's resolution? Hey, I'm going to have more conflicts this year. Right?
I mean,
it's a good point, right?
It's usually I'm going to try to resolve things, or I'm going to try to not fight with it's the opposite. I'm not going to fight with my spouse, or I'm not going to fight with my family, or I'm not going to fight.
So I go back to my original question. I've saved myself, right? If we know it's such a positive thing, it can have good outcomes, why do we avoid it so hard? Yeah, it's painful. But we don't avoid exercise or other things that we know are going to be helpful for us as hard.
Do you think it's because of the fact like it's outside there? The other side of the conflict is outside of your control. When you exercise, it's all about you. In a conflict, there's another person. You can't control how they're going to react, what that's going to happen. And then you also have the risk. Okay, so if I go to the gym and I go to the treadmill, worst case, I'm out of commission for a couple hours because I pushed myself too hard. If you go and you try to resolve or go through a conflict with someone that you care about, what happens if you ruin that relationship?
Come on,
What-
Neil. I'm trying to have a longer conversation about a good topic. Why are you just like hitting it right on point and nailing it between the eyes and like the conversation's over? Mic drop, we're done. No, it's perfect. You're absolutely. I'm
I
sure
think
that's
something
really
that
interesting.
has to be addressed, because I think we talked about chronic
Oh, yeah.
avoidance.
Yeah.
If you take the time, like you said, the benefits far outweigh the avoidance. The benefits of to getting over with far outweigh the long-term avoidance issues. And I think that's where, like you said, people would much rather not pull the Band-Aid off and finally heal versus that momentary pain, because maybe they don't know what's underneath the Band-Aid. How bad does it look? What's going on? And
Yeah. No, I think you're right. The fear and the powerlessness of not being in control with the other person when you're in this state of conflict. And I'm going to go a step further, because I don't really have an answer to my question, by the way. I wasn't baiting or anything. I don't know. You have two of the best answers I think I could have come up with. But there's a big difference with chronic conflict. We talked a lot about that through the episode.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about a conflict between you and me through a therapist's eyes and something you want to do that I want to go in a different direction with. We're talking about a regular and routine personality clash between Chris Gazdick and Neil Robinson chronically. Oh boy, how's that different?
Yeah. Are you still mad at me because I forgot the table today?
No, we're good, man. We're good. He really did, though. He forgot the table. We don't have our normal setup. Like,
But you're correct. The chronic side of it, the problems you run into on that is a completely different. Just like compound trauma versus a single trauma, there's a whole nother ball of wax with that when you deal with that. And
he remembers that term, or did you already know that?
Well, we've talked about it before on some other stuff we're working on, and it's just there is a difference in that chronic repeated, because the question is the chronic conflict because of an overcritical person that just makes your life complicated, that everything you do, they want to fight about it, for whatever reason it is, and when you get tore down so much by that conflict and you're overly stressed about it, in that case, it's easier to avoid and just live that life than it is to get constantly bombarded over and over again with that conflict.
It's interesting. I know this is random, totally taking a tangent, but it's fun to do that sometimes. I love our conversation tonight, Neil, and I think you're a little. I know you. I've gotten to know you well. I think you're a little more advanced than just a non-clinical person in the mental health and substance abuse field with the stuff. Not to mention you've been listening to the show and producing it for what now, a year and a half. But I mean, it's fun to have these conversations with people that are non-clinical for me, right? Because I can see where things are on point or when we trail off, and how we can kind of add information. And like when I was doing the show with non-clinical folks, that's fun. I think I don't know. I appreciate you having this conversation, and these month-end reviews are kind of cool because it really is you and Adam non-clinical, and the conversation is just kind of different.
Plus, I don't throw out those deep medical terms that no one knows except therapists.
I know when you get therapy. I think we do a pretty good job on the show, not being dry and clinical or whatever.
Well, I think it's funny when one of you guys says something deep and it's like some symptom, and then the other person chimes in like, "Oh, layman's term, it means this." Like, you guys do a good job of that. But
you should hear conversations with therapists, just therapist and a therapist sitting there talking about shit. It's like
I'm sure it's just like two IT guys talking.
It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. So this is much better, much better. So where did we land with this idea? Conflict makes a great story, but a lousy life. It's such a big part of therapy a lot of times. And there was another interesting question to review, and John talked about it interestingly. What was that? When you're dealing with conflict, I forget now. Do you remember, Neil, like when you're dealing with conflict, do you see this more as a conflict with yourselves internally,
internal versus
or
external? And John had a very interesting response to that. Because you asked him, like, when you have...
Well, set it up first better than what I just did.
Right. So basically, you asked John, I said, when you look at your patients, do you see most of them, do you resolve internal conflicts or external conflicts?
Right.
And his take was very interesting because he basically said, most of my issues are external because usually there's a conflict outside that they're dealing with that then they have to deal with the internal repercussions of that, basically, is
Right.
what he said. And so
Yeah.
and then he kind of copped out like it's 50-50.
Yeah,
Then he's
he
like,
did.
well, it's 51% external.
Yeah.
Which makes sense about the struggle people go through. An external conflict becomes internalized because of the dealing with it. And so I see his point that, and there's also a lot more variables on the outside that cause
Well, and
it.
I think that he joined with me when we lasered in on that a little bit. It's the external conflicts we deal with in therapy a lot more with the presenting problem.
Yes.
Right? What brings people into therapy. But then when you get into the examination process, which is a scary and intimidating thing, that's why we go slow, people. We don't like just jump into your head or do any weird stuff.
Don't start the treadmill on 15 miles an hour, people.
No.
You start at like 2 or 3 and you walk.
Yes, and we build it and we kind of get into the internal realities that are a part of that conflict. Yeah. But the presenting problem, my wife's crazy and I'm fighting with her all the time, so help me, you know. I mean, of course it's more external. So yeah. So it was cool to talk to Victoria and John about no, Victoria wasn't
just
here.
John. Yeah, Victoria was
we missed her.
babysitting issues.
That's exactly what it was.
There was a problem, and like I don't know what it was,
Yes.
but yeah, she had to go home because of the kid.
Okay, that's right. So it was just John and I. Because I was saying that, I was like, what was Victoria's cool tool
She
for
didn't.
conflict
wasn't there.
resolution? She's got them because we all do.
She was avoiding it. She wanted to deal with conflict.
That sounded like Adam. Anyway, let me see. Where did we land insofar as like how do you do conflict resolutions and all? And it was cool because, you know, I spent a little bit of time. I'm not going to have time to do it now, but you know, the writing activity that I'll prescribe to, and most of the time therapists have these cool things that we've come across over the years or through the miles with like activities to kind of engage, you know, with conflict. But what do you remember, Neil, or think about how we got to more concepts of how to manage conflict? Do you remember much of that, or sort of, I guess I'm saying I wonder if we talked about strategies to work with people on conflict resolution, or if we talked about the emotional things that we try to manage.
No, you talked at the end about what you should do to kind of resolve conflicts, and you know I'm looking at the list now. The one thing that stood out to me is the genuineness. You talked about the more genuine you are in trying to resolve it, the more likely you are to succeed with it. And I think that's when I look at conflicts and I look at those those deeper conflicts that come in, there's a layer that you have to peel away. And sometimes you have to be genuine. You have to go into this resolution with, I really genuinely want to resolve this problem. I genuinely want to repair whatever's going on. And if you don't come at it with that mindset, and you always come at it with, if you don't address your own resentment or your own issues,
right, that's the thing.
You're going to have it's not going to get resolved, because
It's
what's
not
going to
gonna be
happen,
pretty.
going back to taking things personally with your family and friends,
Right.
if you have a chip on your shoulder through this whole process, you go in that way. As soon as they say something, it's the resolution's going to dissolve. It's not going to work. You have to come at it where you really care about the relationship and you care about trying to come to a point where we need to move past this. And I love that.
And in order to do that, what I wanted to get into now, and you're moving us right into the space that I really wanted to get at with where did we land, right? Because it goes to that internal external kind of thing. You're putting some description on a dogged reality that if you have all of these things going on internally that are really rocky, that's where you need to make an intervention. When you're engaged in conflict and you're feeling okay, you're not going to be comfortable. It can be painful, like you said, Neil, but that pain comes from your own experiences, maybe with mommy issues or daddy issues or past trauma that you've had and troubles in relationships that you've had or insecurities that are going on. Look, you will know by your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing, when you start to get heated, when you start to get elevated, you lose objectivity and you lose touch with the ground. You have got to get grounded. You've got to calm yourself down. You've got to take a breath. You've got to contain the emotional realities that you've got going on internally inside. And when you're able to do that, your ability to resolve conflicts goes way high.
Right. Because if you have two people going after each other, it's just going against it. It's like having,
Messy.
Yeah, it gets nasty.
Blood is on the table. And I tell you, I see this in marriage therapy all the time. You come to me in the bottom of the ninth inning, down by 4 runs, 2 outs and a 3-1 count, right? 3 balls and 1 strike for those of you who don't listen to baseball. And you want me to like save the day as a therapist when your blood pressure, sir, is through the roof. Your heart rate, ma'am, is banging like bombs in your chest, and you're sitting there trying to talk about a conversation. It's not going to work.
Right.
It's not. Don't think I'm going to be very successful as a marriage counselor in that circumstance.
It's like if you're trying to build a tower, like you have a sandcastle, you're building a sandcastle, and you're over here trying to build on the left side, and then your internal issue is underneath kind of scooping out the sand. And so as you're building yours to make it work, it keeps crumbling. You're like, why is this crumbling?
True.
You're like, I'm trying to fix this, but yet you don't realize there's something underneath taking that foundation. So like you said, if you don't address the internal,
that is so perfect.
not only do you
Neil.
have the external conflict that you see, but you have the internal conflict that you haven't addressed.
That you might not see.
Right, that you don't see. And so that's why it's important that you can control yourself. So
And you might
fix
not
that.
see it, so you blame the other person.
We talk about the implicit biases.
Yes, sir.
So
No, that is an awesome metaphor, man. I love that to death. We are so going to use that in Chris Gazdik's therapy because when you're building a castle, you want to get this worked out. You want to get this set up. You want to get this organized and arranged with the other person that you're working with. And you've just got all this water coming right underneath, just like the ocean and the waves.
Yep.
And it just, and as much as you restack, it just melts.
Yep.
Because you're not dealing with yourself internally. That was a mic drop right there. Nicely done. Nicely done.
The other part I liked about you brought up as a point is your timing of discussions.
Oh, yeah, I suck at that.
That's huge because I do that with I tell my kids, like, if you want something from your mother, you have to be very conscious about when you ask. And so I think that's important too, because I feel like you said, if they're already heated, you're going to have a hard time resolving. You got to find
Choose a different time.
You have to, and so I think that's very important. So deal with your internal stuff, and when you're ready to talk to them, make sure that you know it's a good time. I mean, sometimes some relationship you can blow up and you both yell at each other. You finally get it out because you don't.
People are good to do that.
But sometimes it's just be smart. You know?
You know what type of relationship that is? That's an abandonment relationship where both people are just like.
That sounds horrible.
It is horrible.
From my side as an engulfment, that's horrible.
From my side too, Neil. That was terrible. Yeah. All right, listen, we're going to pump out in May some new episodes, some new shows. Stick with us, stay with us. I'm glad that you listened to the April month in review. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I'm going to disappear. So.
Say goodbye now.
Bye.
So listen, we're gonna now I don't know how to wrap us up, man. Just push the button. Here we go. We'll see you next week. Stay well.